Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're glad to have you join us today for a webinar on value of enterprise architecture. I'm Jill Schuler with Max Technical Training, and I'm your moderator today. Today's Lunch and Learn is brought to you by Max Technical Training, premier provider of software, professional skills education for IT and business professionals, and CC&C Solutions, a global enterprise architecture consultancy with close ties to the Open Group and TOGAF. Max has been delivering training in top technologies and methodologies for over 18 years. We want to share with you that training at the content at Max Training is not one size fits all. Not only do we provide standard out-of-the-box training, we also develop and deliver modified and customized training tailored to fit each of our clients' needs. And training delivery is also not one size fits all. From in-classroom face-to-face or live virtual training to e-learning or even one-on-one training and mentoring, we have a wide range of services. We offer public classes, and we also conduct a great deal of private classes for our clients. So we're just about ready to start and wanted to go over just a couple of housekeeping tips here. Mike is going to present for about 45 minutes, and he is open to taking questions during his presentation, so feel free to just type your questions in the section found in your GoToWebinar doc. We are recording this webinar and will email a link to the recording and to the slide deck no later than tomorrow. And we just wanted to give you a heads up at the end of the webinar. You're going to be given an offer of 20% off of 18 different courses for being here today, so stay tuned for that. And now I am very pleased to introduce to you Michael Fulton, President of CC&C Solutions Americas Division. CC&C Solutions is a global enterprise architecture consultancy with close ties to the Open Group and TOGAF, the Open Group's architecture framework. And Mike has an incredible background. He's an experienced architect with over 8 years of experience in enterprise architecture and over 20 years of IT experience. He's TOGAF certified, a cloud certified architect. Michael has led IT for IT architecture, cloud architecture, IT strategic planning, disruptive cost innovation, IT leadership development, and enterprise architecture capability and training development at Fortune 500 companies. He also has experience working across the entire IT lifecycle, including time in service management, program management, project management, application development, and IT operations. Wow. So, Michael, welcome. We're glad you're here, and tell us a little bit about who CC&C is.
Thanks, Jill. Hopefully folks can hear me okay. I am noticing a little bit of lag on the phone line today. So if you experience any issues with the conference, please go ahead and let our folks know in the chat room so that we can work to resolve and correct that if it becomes an issue. As Jill mentioned, I do work for CC&C Solutions. CC&C Solutions is a global enterprise architecture and IT transformation consulting and training company. We're based out of Sydney, Australia, but we've got folks worldwide. I run the Americas division for CC&C, and our mission is really to help lead the development and growth of enterprise architecture and IT capability. We do that for individuals, we do that for organizations, and we do that actively through participation within the industry. And so that's one of the things that we like to do. Today we're gonna take a look at value of enterprise architecture. We're going to talk very briefly about just in review what enterprise architecture is to make sure that we're all on the same page, and then we're going to dig into some external perspectives on the value of enterprise architecture, and then I'll share with you the CC&C perspective on the value of enterprise architecture, what it might mean to you. As Jill mentioned, I do expect this conversation to take about 45 minutes, so we'll have time for questions. Feel free to ask your questions both along the way as well as at the end as well. So to start with, I want to make sure we're all kind of on the same page here. So there's a couple ways that we look at enterprise architecture. First, as you know, strategy is the big picture. Strategy is the vision. Strategy is where we're going as an organization. Execution, on the other hand, is the day-to-day. It's how work gets done and it's where the rubber meets the road. You can't have a truly successful organization without both, but the difficulty really comes in trying to translate our strategies into a plan that we can, as an organization, get behind and actually execute. That's where enterprise architecture comes in. Enterprise architecture bridges the gap between strategy and execution. Enterprise architecture is how we develop that executable transformation plan for our enterprise, and enterprise architecture is how we align that plan with all the different pieces of the enterprise. So that's a key piece or key description of what enterprise architecture is. Now we can also look at enterprise architecture from a slightly more descriptive view of what it is. As you can see on this slide, enterprise architecture is all about understanding where you are today with your business processes, your data, your applications, and your technology. It's about understanding how things get built, used, and shared. And it's about putting together, again, that plan to improve what we have. So that's another way to kind of think about and look at enterprise architecture. And the third thing I like to do when we talk about enterprise architecture is really look at it with a metaphor. And so the metaphor we use is a city planning metaphor. So if you think about enterprise architecture, it's very similar to city planning. It's all about making sure that all of the different houses within a neighborhood are going to fit together. It's about helping to make sure that neighborhoods have the proper roadways, the proper utilities, the proper shared infrastructure, and it's about making sure that everything kind of stays together in a cohesive fashion. Enterprise architecture does the same thing for the IT landscape. We look at the applications and make sure that those applications fit together. We look at the business processes, the roads that go between the applications. We look at the information that flows back and forth from application to application to get work done. We looked at the technologies or the shared infrastructures that are needed to run our applications. And so we like this metaphor of enterprise architecture being city planning for IT. So now that we're all kind of set and established on what an enterprise architecture is, the next thing I want to kind of talk you through is why we care about the value of enterprise architecture. So, of course, if you weren't here today, you probably didn't care. But since you are here, you probably do care. You probably have a sense of that. But very specifically, there are three reasons I want to talk through that are why we care about the value of enterprise architecture. First, in order for us to be able to get the right kind of organizational funding and support, we need to be able to develop a business case. And in order for us to be able to develop a business case, we have to be able to talk to value. If you cannot articulate the value for a CIO, he or she isn't going to fund or support the enterprise architecture work that we want to do, and that's going to make it difficult or impossible to move forward. So that's a key piece of why we need to be able to talk to value. The second piece is that we want to be able to engage the rest of the organization. We want the rest of the organization to be willing to engage with us. So we need to be real crystal clear on what the value is to each of the individual stakeholders that we engage with. If we can't help them do their jobs better, they're just going to go right around us. They're not going to engage us or involve us. And then the last thing that really is important to understand about enterprise architecture and why we care about value is something that I call the 7-ish year itch. And we're going to talk a little bit about that over the next couple of slides. So as you can see here in the slide, I've got a source where I got these next couple of pictures from that I really liked. But there's basically a cyclical behavior, and I call it the 7-ish year itch. It's not exactly 7 years. It's typically somewhere between 3 and 7 year cycles within organizations, depending on the pace of change. But it's a very similar sort of a concept. Basically, what we end up seeing happening is organizations many times will stand up an enterprise architecture group in response to either a convoluted IT landscape or major business change or something where they realize that they need some help trying to drive those executable plans for the business, right? Sometimes that that will come to life, and people will really significantly see the value of enterprise architecture, and the EA team will get to the point where it starts to self-sustain, right? It starts to really get humming and providing the things that the organization is looking for. Then over time, like anything, you may see a slight decline in performance by the EA group as they kind of get into their groove. And then a major organizational change might happen. Maybe it's a reorganization, maybe it's a change in sponsorship, maybe a CIO transition has happened. Those happen typically every 3 to 5 years. Maybe it's external economic cycles or things like that. Maybe it's internal cycles. Regardless of what it is, basically what happens is that organizations start to miss the value of enterprise architecture. They start to lose that understanding of what enterprise architecture is doing for them, because enterprise architecture is really looking at the bigger picture, and it is somewhat hard to quantify value on it, which we'll continue to talk through the rest of the day today. And so what ends up happening then is a new CIO trying to make a significant impact might come in and kill their enterprise architecture team or restructure it, and basically they'll see some gains, typically for a period of 6 to 12 months. And that's what we'll talk here in the next slide. You can get away with this for a period of time. And so you can live without an IT strategy for a period of time, and it's really typically not going to have a huge short-term impact. But it will have a long-term impact, and people start to see that in a time period of about 6 to 12 months. And that's where you see the cyclical notions start to turn up, where after that 6 to 12 month period, the organization starts to realize that, hey, there's something missing here. We really should have kept those EA folks around. They really were adding value to us as an organization. And they again go through this cycle. Sometimes what historically I have seen, and I'll just kind of share my own experience here, I've seen that cycle of having an enterprise architecture group last for many times 5 to 7 years. And then if that group is going to disappear, it typically will disappear for a period of somewhere between 18 months and 3 years. Most organizations don't last, organizations of any size don't last without EA for longer than 3 years, simply because it is an important piece of the picture. And then they start to rebuild it. What I also have noticed is that over the last 5 years, as I talked to a number of companies and hear different experiences, the cycles are speeding up. The cycle is reducing. So it's now more of a 3 to 5 year cycle where you have EA, and now it's more of a 12 to 18 month cycle where you might get rid of it before you realize, hey, I need to put it back in place. So things are speeding up, and folks are starting to get through the value. Now, if we go back for just a second to that previous slide, the key part of our discussion today is how do we cross that chasm and keep our enterprise architecture teams around for the long term? How do we make sure that during that time period, during that phase of change, whether it's that CIO transition or some other reorganization, that the organization's leadership understands the value of enterprise architecture through demonstrated use cases, through things that they have done. And that's how you get over that hump and you continue to maintain your EA function over a period of time, is you demonstrate that value, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get too far into it, though, let's do a quick poll. Jill, can you pop our poll up and we can ask the poll question?
I sure can. Here we go. Okay. So we're looking for everyone to vote. We're at 10%. And now we're at 24% of you voting. 43%. And I'll give it another 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. We've got 81% folks voting. Here we go. Closing the poll. I'm going to share the results. Mike, can you see those results?
I can.
Good.
Yeah. So I think this is good. As you can see from here, we've got a wide range of answers. Actually, as we'll see on our next slide, all of these are correct to some level of detail. The one that is the least correct is probably knowing your customers better. As an organization, typically it's not the enterprise architecture team that is actively out trying to understand an enterprise's customers. So that's probably the least correct answer. But enterprise architecture in the evaluation and understanding of the business requirements of the organization can help bring the customers more closely. But as we'll see on this next slide, on this external perspective from Gartner, enterprise architecture absolutely does provide higher profitability, faster time to market, and lower costs for IT organizations. This was actually a Harvard Business Press study that was done several years ago that demonstrated these things. So that's one piece of the picture here when we talk about value of enterprise architecture that I wanted to share. Fairly simple, but well formed. The next part I wanted to talk about is from a book called EA-3, An Introduction to Enterprise Architecture by Scott Bernard. And in this book, Scott talks a lot about value of enterprise architecture, and he really brings it back to 3 significant things. The first one is all about improving the planning processes. You can enhance your top-down planning and your bottom-up planning both through a strong enterprise architecture function. The second thing he highlights is decision-making. Having the artifacts and views that enterprise architecture typically produces that shows where things are at in your business and your IT landscape can improve your decision-making processes for your senior leadership. Having the ability to be able to do some scenario planning, to be able to look at different future states, to be able to look at different roadmaps options, again, can help us improve decision-making when it comes to allocation of our resources. And then finally, enterprise architecture, according to Scott Bernard, really does improve communication throughout enterprise. It gives us all an aligned picture of the current state of our business and our IT landscapes, and allows us to talk in the same language if we're all going back to and looking at our enterprise architecture. Now there are a couple more external perspectives I wanted to share, and as you'll see, each of these perspectives brings its own nuances to the table, which is why I wanted to take a couple of different looks at this. This particular perspective really comes from Booz and Company, and was a research study that was done several years ago. They actually talk through some of the different things that are driving value for us. So if we're bringing our enterprise architecture standards into project delivery, that's a key element of driving business value, because it allows our projects to be more well aligned, to be more effective, to move quicker. So that's a key piece of how we move forward. Clearly defined governance and decision rights is another value driver they outlined, and that one is all about helping drive risk reduction within the organization, making sure that the right people are aware and have the information that they need to be able to make the best decisions possible for an organization. That's another great thing that enterprise architecture can do to connect the dots for an organization. Performance measurement, the value here, this one's actually a little more internally focused. What they're recommending here is that your enterprise architecture teams need to formalize performance management. So if an enterprise architecture team is measuring and tracking and reporting against a set of performance metrics for the work that they do, they will end up being more effective and more efficient within an organization, and they will end up driving more value for the organization. So that's an interesting element there. This next piece around staff confidence, I think, is an important. One of the key roles of enterprise architecture is really to be a trusted advisor for the senior leadership in an organization, whether that's an enterprise or business architect who really may be a trusted advisor for a CEO or the C-level in an organization, or the senior leadership in an organization, or maybe it's an application or solution architect or an IT architect that may be a trusted advisor for the CIO and the IT leadership in an organization. By having that advisor to help them, it gives the CIO or the CEO a stronger sense of confidence in the decisions that they make. And it really, from an enterprise architecture perspective, positions the EA team well within an organization to sustain over the long period of time. And then finally, the key piece that Booz and Company here at the top of this picture is highlighting is enterprise architecture's involvement in strategic alignment. If we go back to that very, very first slide I shared with you today, I shared with you this concept that enterprise architecture is about taking strategy and translating it into execution, creating the executable plan to deliver the strategies of the business. And so when you get your enterprise architects deeply involved in strategic planning and the strategic alignment processes, that's when they're going to be most effective delivering results for you and your organization. So that's the perspective from Booz and Company, which I thought was an interesting, slightly different take. And these next two slides that I'll share actually come from Capgemini. And Capgemini talks about this really in two different perspectives. The first is looking at the specific values that both enterprise and solution architecture can deliver for organizations. So enterprise architecture, again, aligning strategy with execution, providing actionable guidance to investment decisions, driving simplification across business and technology landscapes, looking across organizations, breaking down the silos, and driving agility through reuse across silos. Those are some of the things that they're talking about there within Capgemini on the enterprise architecture side. On the solution architecture side, what we're really looking at here is driving optimal solutions, trying to drive end-to-end solutions that are going to best balance the business needs and what's available to us from a technology perspective. Trying to put in place a reduction in project complexity and risk. So how do we make our projects work more effectively and deliver more effectively? Solution architecture has a role in making sure that we are delivering our technical solutions that meet the stakeholder needs. So there's some clear things that come in place there. So lots of ways that solution architecture very specifically improves project success and the overall value equation and return on investment on our projects. So that's a nice perspective from Capgemini. And then this other perspective from Capgemini, what they've done here is they've actually created a value matrix that talks about some of the different ways that we can increase value. So across the left-hand side, you've got an increased value. Across the bottom, it looks like my my label disappeared for some reason, that should be decreased cost. So what you're doing in the four quadrants, that initial quadrant down in the lower left of increasing project success is all about solution architecture, some of the things we just talked about in there. If we go up to expand IT reach, this is where your enterprise architecture team is looking outside the organization, whether that be outside the IT organization, outside the business unit they're working with, outside the organization in total. And I think that's an important thing that our enterprise architecture teams can do. So so we definitely want to look for that. Now, if we go down to the bottom right, what you'll see is this element of reducing IT costs. And there's a couple of different elements and ways that you can reduce IT costs as enterprise architects. The first is through identifying and re-platforming your solutions into better alternatives. And then the second really is all about consolidation or rationalization, making sure that you as an organization only have a single set of solutions to meet any single set of business requirements, and trying to drive the optimal size of your IT landscape through a rationalization process. It's a great way for us to reduce IT costs. And then when we've kind of gone through the entire cycle, when we've got a strong enterprise architecture team that's really adding value across the organization, then we're up in that upper right-hand corner where we're really driving business agility. We're able to move faster than our competition. We're able to reduce our risk by having the right IT and the right business processes in place and the right business model in place across our organization. So that's the Capgemini Enterprise Architecture Value Matrix. Now this last one that I'll show, and I apologize again, I see another mistake here on the slide. This is actually not from Booz & Company again. This is actually from CAIS. You'll see the link down there at the bottom if you want to look at the details. But here where this study that was done identified 4 key drivers of value for enterprise architecture. And so this particular study said enterprise architecture is all about organizational alignment, information availability, resource optimization, whether that be people resources, technical resources, whatever kind of resources we may be talking about, or resource complementarity. It's a big word. But that's really all about making sure that all of the resources of the organization are going after the strategic goals of the organization. So that's a perspective and a study that was done by an organization called CAIS. And you can read more on any of those through the links that will be provided in the slides. Now, as you can see from this discussion and all of these different perspectives, there's not a tremendous amount of clarity here, right? There's a lot of fuzziness. Everybody's got a little bit of a different perspective. There's no easy button for defining enterprise architecture value. And so in order to try and help with that, the way that I try to simplify this down is what we'll talk about next, kind of the CC&C perspective on enterprise architecture value. And at the end of the day, what we're really trying to come back to is the fundamental relationship of value between benefits, cost, and risk. And so we'll talk about benefits being new capabilities, speed, agility, revenue generation. We'll talk about cost being dollars, productivity, opportunity cost, cost of delay, and risk, the external reaction to disasters, legislative risks, and other kinds of things that may be going on in your organization. What we'll look at in the next few slides is how enterprise architecture can impact each of these. And so for each of these 3 areas, we'll look at 3 clear impacts that enterprise architecture will have that will drive value up for the organization. So the first one that we're going to look at is benefit. So one of the things that we look at when we talk about benefit is that Enterprise architecture can uniquely architect your business and your IT landscape by design rather than by accident. Every organization, regardless of size, regardless of structure, has an enterprise architecture. The question is that enterprise architecture something that is managed, or is that enterprise architecture something that was developed by accident? Smaller organizations, the enterprise architecture for the organization is really implicit. It sits in the head of the founder or the leadership team. As an organization gets bigger and bigger, they need to formalize their enterprise architecture. They need to document their enterprise architecture. They need to be able to communicate their enterprise architecture across the organization. A big piece of the value here for the organization is when enterprise architecture teams architect by design. We put a structure in place that everybody can understand, and we communicate that structure, and then we align the organization to that structure. That makes it easier for us to work with. And so that's a key important piece of the value of enterprise architecture. Now, if we've got that structure, the next thing that we can do is we can uniquely identify the gaps in organizational capability. We can find the spaces where we don't have automation, where we don't have technology, where we don't have aligned business processes, and are causing problems with us organizationally today. And we can help the organization find those and drive improvements against those. So that's a key piece of the benefit value here. And then the third, agility. And so it's important to us from a time to market perspective that we're fast and agile. So enterprise architecture, by identifying opportunities for reuse, by driving improved interoperability, by driving up the quality of data across the organization, can indeed have an impact on the agility and time to market for new products for customers or things like that. So that's a key benefit for the organization. Now we'll also see, and it's not here on the slide, but it's probably worth mentioning, in today's world of digital transformation, we're now seeing information technology and enterprise architecture have an impact on the business models of company, really creating new opportunities for revenue generation in ways that aren't possible without technology, that aren't possible without good, solid enterprise architecture. So that's another key way that enterprise architecture can impact the benefit side of this dice. Now let's look at the second side, which is going to be the cost part of the equation. What can enterprise architecture do to impact cost? Well, there's a few things. First, we drive rationalized business process and IT landscape. By making sure that we don't have overlaps in what we have available to us, it allows us to drive our costs down. We can drive proactively IT cost optimization through replatforming. We can move from one tool that costs us $1 million a year to another tool that provides the same functionality for $500,000 a year, as an example. We can do those kind of proactive looks at our landscape to figure out where replatforming can provide us those kind of benefits. And then the third thing that we can do to drive costs down is we look across projects, across organizational silos, and we drive rework out of the process. So we find when those projects are working on the same thing, and we've got 3 projects in the organization that are all working on the same thing, and we help reconcile that and bring that down to 1. We help see across the silos of an organization that people, because they're so focused on their day-to-day, can't do on their own. And by doing that, we really can drive a considerable amount of cost, waste, friction out of the system. Now, the last piece that is on our little 3-sided die there, it's actually probably a 6-sided die, but we're only looking at 3 sides of it, is this element of risk reduction. And when we're talking about risk, and reducing our risk, there are a couple of ways that enterprise architecture does that. First, it's driving the alignment between business and IT, right? It is a risk to the organization when our IT function is off doing one thing that doesn't align with what the business is looking for. It is going to put us at financial risk. It may put us at customer risk. It may put us at reputation risk. So it's important that we have that alignment between the business and IT. The second thing that enterprise architecture drives is, again, back to that very first slide, the alignment between strategy and execution. By monitoring what we're doing, by governing the organization, by making sure that we align that executable plan broadly across the organization, we help make sure that what gets delivered is what gets asked for by the senior leadership. And that's an important element. I actually took out a slide that talks to this quite a bit. There's something in the neighborhood of 23% of strategies in organizations actually get executed as designed. And it's some number fairly close to that based on the research study that was done. And part of this role of enterprise architecture is really to drive that number up, to make sure that the strategies we're putting in place actually get delivered by the organization. And then that last piece here on risk is making sure that we have an understanding of legal and security potential impacts, and that we're proactively identifying and making the organization aware of those so that they can be mitigated appropriately. That's a key part of the role of enterprise architecture, is to understand that. Now, one of the things that is important here is that we need to understand in this conversation of value, we need to understand who our audience is, right? So it's not enough to just say there is the value that we just described for enterprise architecture. We also need to come back and put it in the context of the people that are our key stakeholders that care about it. And we need to make sure that we're driving this conversation in a way that they see as appropriate, right? And so the next couple of slides, we'll take a quick look at that. So on this next slide, we'll look at the value from a perspective of the business. The first perspective that we'll look at here is really the perspective of the CEO or the strategy officer or the board. And part of the value of enterprise architecture here is, again, comes back to this concept of aligning corporate strategies with execution, making sure that we've got the right technology support for our corporate strategies, making sure that we have the right governance in place, and then making sure that we've got the right information to support that strategic corporate decision making. So that's a key part of what we're trying to drive. Another perspective is the perspective of the CFO. What does the CFO care about? They care about cost and compliance, right? And so enterprise architecture is critically important to the CFO because a big part of the value we provide is to drive the total cost of our IT landscape down. So if we can do that, then we're going to make the CFO very happy. We're also going to make sure through that last risk reduction discussion that we had a minute ago that we're in compliance across the organization. We're helping to drive the organization to meet compliance requirements. And then we're going to improve the overall rate of usage of our assets, success of our projects, things like that. So that's another valuable element for the CFO. Now for the line managers in the business, what they really care about is, how's my process working? How's my organization functioning? Can I standardize? Can I reuse my processes? Can I meet my personal business objectives through the deployment of IT and through the use of enterprise architecture? And so, again, EA adds a lot of value there by helping business unit managers see opportunities for sharing resources and driving the costs down. Now we talked about the business perspective. Let's also take a quick second and talk about the perspective of IT. So there's a couple of key stakeholders on the IT side that we really want to focus in on. The first is going to be our CIO. All right. From a CIO perspective, just like some of the senior leadership concepts, that he's really cared about, or she is really cared about, driving complexity out of their organization, reducing friction in their organization, making sure that their IT organization is seen as a professional, efficient organization and delivers when asked. And enterprise architecture can add value to all of that. The project manager, the project managers, we talked a lot about the value that solution architecture provides to the project manager, the ability to make our project delivery more effective, more reliable, to reduce rework within our project, to identify overlaps. All those things help us make sure that we're delivering the highest quality projects possible. And then that last perspective of the operations, the IT operations manager, by understanding that at the end of the day, what we're delivering from an operations side is adding value to the company's strategies, is an important piece of the puzzle from a standpoint of employee satisfaction. Enterprise architecture also drives out downtime. Enterprise architecture also drives up reliability through the appropriate designs to help our IT projects meet our service level agreements. So all these things really tie into supporting the operations manager and the work that they're trying to do. So with that, I think we've got a poll question coming up next. So let me turn it back over to Jill to ask the question, which of the following is not a key element of value?
There we go.
Enterprise architecture?
Well, you guys are faster this time. We're at 52% already. Okay, we'll give it about another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great. Closing the poll and sharing the results. So what do you think, Mike?
Well, it looks like people have been paying attention. Clearly, the answer we were looking for on this one is perception. If you remember that little dice, we had 3 sides that we were showing on the dice, and those sides were benefits, cost, and risk. So perception really is the item here that is not a critical element of value. Very good. Now, we've talked a lot about enterprise architecture value throughout the conversation today. But before we close, I wanted to highlight a couple of roadblocks. There are some roadblocks to assessing value. The first that I would highlight is the difficulty in linking the output of enterprise architecture to the outcomes that are actually tangibly delivering the value. And I don't know why my slide wasn't going, but now it is. Should be coming up here in just a second. Apologies for that. So understanding and linking our outputs, our EA outputs to the business outcomes can be a difficult thing. And it's one of the reasons why when I talk to organizations about measuring their value, I actually recommend that they start with not benefits, but the cost and the risk side of the dice. When you look at the benefits side, the outcomes related to benefits, a lot of times it's very difficult to tangibly tie EA outputs to the benefit outcomes that you're looking for. Because typically there's a lot of other people that are involved along the way, project managers, innovation managers, business change managers, whatnot, that are contributing to the picture as well and want their own piece of the credit, so to speak. And so, so tying the benefits out can be a little difficult. What usually is a lot easier is tying out the cost outcomes from your EA outputs. When you look at the work that enterprise architecture does to drive rationalization across your enterprise landscape, to look across and identify overlaps in projects, those things can be quantified as cost reduction much more simply and easily, and can be taken back to those business outcomes that people can understand and gravitate towards. The second piece of a roadblock here is that fundamentally trying to link all this out requires changes to our business processes within our organizations to be able to capture the right kind of metrics that we need. And that can be hard sometimes. Just getting people to see the importance of collecting metrics to support the linkages that we want to make can be very difficult. And so that can many times get in the way. And then the last thing that I would say here is that there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to enterprise architecture value, because different organizations have different drivers that are most important to them. And so it's important to make sure that when you're having this discussion around EA value, that you're linking it back to the most important corporate objectives, or else it's not going to resonate with your organization. All right, so I think we've got another poll coming up here. We have a couple of courses that help you better understand enterprise architecture that we teach here through CC&C. The Introduction to Enterprise and IT Architecture, which is a one-day course, the Solution Architecture for the Practitioner, which really talks about how you do those solution designs with the project teams. And then the TOGAF certification course, which is a 4-day enterprise architecture training course that gets you certified in one of the industry-leading certifications. So I wanted to ask folks if there were any of these that they might be interested in learning more about. So let's go ahead and flip to the poll. Let folks fill that out real quick.
These courses are new for us, and we're very interested in just getting a sense and taking a pulse of the level of interest. So this is really helpful to us.
And while you're answering, I'll give a little plug for what will be coming in more details in a couple of slides. All three of these courses are part of the list of courses that you'll see later that are being offered for 20% off because of your attendance at this webinar. So if these courses are something you are interested in trying to do, take advantage of that 20% off and schedule your course. So let's go ahead and look at those results, Joe. Great, it looks like we've got interest in the introduction course and a little bit less, but still some interest in the solution architecture course. And then a few people interested in the TOGAF course, but not many. I would say that's a fairly nice mix and fairly standard for this kind of an audience. TOGAF really is a course that's intended to be for the person that is really the practicing enterprise architect and has been doing this a little bit before they come in and get the certification. So that makes perfect sense. Let's go ahead and go back to the slides. And since folks were most interested in that enterprise architecture course, I'll give you just a little bit more about it. We do have a version coming up here on February 22nd. This course is going to be an introductory course designed to help you have an understanding of the benefits of enterprise architecture, what the work of an enterprise architecture team is, the impact it has within an organization. We'll talk about different types of EA. We'll talk about roles and career paths. We'll get into a little more detail around value that we talked today, and we'll talk about the impact an enterprise architecture has on its organization. So that course is there and available for you. Now we asked whether you'd be interested in learning more about the courses. This one's a little more specific, so we'll flip back over to the poll and ask, is there anybody that would actually be interested in taking that enterprise architecture or the Intro to Enterprise and IT Architecture class, given the additional information?
Boy, you guys are quick on the draw. Wow. Thank you so much. I'll give it another couple of seconds and then I'll be closing the poll.
All right, so it looks like a couple of you are either interested or very interested, and there's a number of you that are somewhat interested, so great. You'll see here in just a second as we flip back over the slides, you can obviously reach out to Max to sign up for that course. We'll get some information on how to do that over the next few slides. You can also connect with me directly and I'll help you answer any questions you might have around the course or the discussion today, or direct you to how to sign up. But with that, I will open up the floor for questions.
So you can type your questions in the question box to let us know what question you would like Mike to respond to.
And Jill, while they're thinking of their questions and getting them typed in, I think you wanted to give them that information about the training classes. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Because you all have attended this webinar, we are offering an exclusive opportunity to secure a seat in one of 18 selected classes, which are listed right here. And remember, you're going to get a copy of all of this today or tomorrow in a follow-up, so that if you contact us before 5 p.m. on Friday, February the 12th, to reserve a seat, you can get the 20% off. That doesn't mean you have to have paid for it, because we know sometimes it takes a while to get the processes in motion to actually get the billing through. But if you do contact us and reserve a seat before Friday the 12th, then we can make sure you get that 20% off. And Mike, can you add anything about the enterprise architecture courses specifically that you're going to be teaching?
I think we already talked a little bit about the introduction course, the solution architecture course, and the TOGAF course. So I'll mention the one that we didn't talk about, and that's the introduction to IT for IT. For those that aren't familiar with it, IT for IT is actually a reference architecture for the management of the business of IT. So it's really targeted inward at the IT function and talks to how we do work in IT and the tools that we use and the data that flows throughout our systems like our service, our help desk, our project management systems, our development systems, our testing systems, all those kinds of things get addressed with that. IT for IT is a new industry standard. It's fairly similar in scope to IDLE. In a lot of ways, it's the easiest way to think about it initially, but there are a lot of key differences between the two. IDLE and IT for IT actually are very complementary and work very nicely together. And so we've got a one-day course on that. If you're not familiar with IT for IT and want to get just a little snippet of it, we did an introduction to IT for IT webinar yesterday that ran about 45 minutes as well. And I would recommend you check the link out on the Max website to that if you're interested in that topic.
Okay, Mike, we have a great question here. My organization has an IT department of 6. Total employees is about 60. What might be the benefit to us?
The The benefits to a fairly small IT organization of enterprise architecture, I'm assuming we're talking about enterprise architecture there, not the IT for IT I was just mentioning. Basically, the way I would describe it is that, again, I come back to this concept of every organization has an enterprise architecture. It's just a matter of whether it is implicit or explicit. So what you may do with a small organization that only has about 6 people is that you may have one person that really applies some enterprise architecture thinking to their job and really is responsible for making sure they understand the overall IT landscape, the overall business landscape of the company. Maybe they're simply documenting in PowerPoint or Excel or Word some of the things you have, like an application catalog. Even a small IT shop is still going to have 100, maybe 200 applications that their company uses. And so somebody's got to understand when all that stuff needs to get updated, needs to change, needs to understand the interactions between all those things. So I think there's still some value in enterprise architecture even to the small shop. But again, it's going to be a small part of someone's role, and it's going to be more the thinking than the formal processes that you're going to apply.
Thanks, Mike. You have clearly covered a great deal of information, and it would seem that a lot of questions have already been answered. So this is the only question we have for now. So I want to thank you again, Mike. This has been really, really helpful and valuable information, and really appreciate a great webinar. Wanted to just remind everyone that you will be receiving a link to the slide deck and the recording. Remind you to take a look at these courses when you get that and see if there are any that are of interest to you. And also to let you know that we do have a money-back guarantee, employer insurance, I'm sorry. We have free retakes available, courses that are guaranteed to go, and a fabulous place to learn. It's a great environment, and our students really love it here. So with that, we really want to thank everyone for your attendance, and we hope you'll join us again for future webinars, and have a great day. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Joe.